Welcome to Command Control Power, the longest-running Apple consulting podcast. For over a decade, we've delivered weekly episodes filled with epic tech support stories, troubleshooting insights, discussions about managing clients and businesses, and interviews with industry colleagues and vendors, all tailored for our pro listeners. We also offer exclusive content through Patreon. This private podcast feed is designed specifically for IT professionals, providing valuable advice and guidance on tackling the more complex aspects of running your practice, working with clients and employees, and managing device fleets. With a modest monthly contribution, you'll gain access to a wealth of advanced Apple expertise, meaningful connections, and a community driven by a shared passion for Apple technology. Visit commandcontrolpower.com and click support to learn more. And now, on to the show.
Welcome to Command Control Power. We are pleased to be joined once again by Adam Engst of Tidbits Content Network. Welcome, Adam.
Hey, glad to be here as always.
35 years of Tidbits. Congratulations.
Yeah, that's one of those ones where I was like, really? How did that happen? I'm always surprised. It rolls around. I mean, I will say, man, you try writing about the anniversary kind of thing every year for 35 years. After a while, you start running out of stuff to say. Sure. It's like as simple as that. Okay, what am I going to do this time? Yeah. And so, but it is, I'm always a little surprised now when April rolls around, like, oh, wow, must be another anniversary. Okay. Let's see which one this one is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But not about your marriage, right? That's a whole different, that's always a celebration.
Always a big champagne.
Exactly. Nice. Yeah, this is a great occasion to have you back on. Of course, there's always a lot to talk about. You did write a great article Sam mentioned in our little private chat about your kind of celebration of 35 years, acknowledging that. And I pulled a few quotes from that. I would love to kind of start there and just sort of see where that gets us. So one thing, I mean, you do a great job of kind of walking this line, like we have to do in the modern era where, you can't help but acknowledge what's going on broadly, politically, but you don't want to be too polarizing about it. So I'll just quote you here. So, like many, I find it difficult not to obsess about current events, and I encourage you to align your actions with your values in a way that feels right to you. When the path forward seems unclear, I believe we can best contribute by modeling the behavior we want to see in the world. How we conduct business on an everyday basis matters. For Tidbits, that means writing clearly and accurately, prioritizing thoughtfulness and depth over speed, acknowledging our mistakes, and engaging with readers on a personal level. It means practicing kindness, decency, and respect wherever possible. So I wanted to just say, very well said. Those are words we can all live by. And it's the way I've tried to practice my business for 20 years, is just to kind of like live that way, right?
Yeah, and I mean, because it is tough, and there's a lot happening that I don't approve of the way it's happening at all, and I can't do anything about it. Just can't, and so when I was, it's just so frustrating, but it really does come down to we can be. This is be the change you want to see in the world. And hopefully there's no actual change involved. Like we don't have to change what we're doing because we're going to be decent, honest people. But I think for this audience, I mean, we really are in business, and how we conduct ourselves in that area matters. There's clearly lots of businesses in this world that suck. That are basically out to make a buck, exploit their customers and move on, and I find that deeply troubling. Or businesses which, hey, we make money, therefore we can do all this stuff in the rest of the world that is not good. And so those are the times where we get to, make a small statement. This isn't the big, hey, look at me kind of thing. It's just, this is the way I believe the world should work.
Yeah.
And stand behind that.
Yeah.
Right.
Nice.
Lead by example.
Lead by example. Yep. Exactly. I've got one more little quote just on that topic, kind of furthering that, again, from Adam. We can't fix society's problems through thoughtful tech writing or helpful support, but we can continue to show in our tiny corner of the internet that it's possible to create an organization that prioritizes helping people over exploiting their eyeballs that values substance over speed and that values community over controversy. This mission feels more vital now than ever. So just further, your own words reflected back to you, Adam, because that's further to what you were just saying and kind of what we're all trying to do here. Yeah, really well said. And I think that's a great opportunity because you write to a massive audience, and so it's a good platform to be able to use to maybe say that and suggest that to other people. And each of us, works with any number of clients, and so we can have those little interactions with people that brighten their day a little bit, maybe kind of, reframe something that's, like annoying them about, well, maybe it's tech, maybe it's politics, and just sort of like have that little bit of influence on people and the way they go about their day. And over the compounding benefits of time, maybe things do get a little better, right?
Yeah. Well, and I do think that being nice to people, not like firing them randomly, where like that's something that a whole lot of businesses have to think about. Like how would you let someone go if you had to, and that's a place where it's not pleasant for anyone, but you can do it in better and worse ways. A simple example, which I think a lot of people are dealing with right now. Seeing in the world, like I said, I know I'm in Ithaca, where Cornell University is located, and I know a lot of scientists who are basically seeing their labs disappear. Yeah. Those people, like, how do they tell their postdocs and graduate students, sorry, I can't pay you anymore? Yeah. And so that is just a super, super hard thing to do. And so, we can keep in mind, like, okay, we have to do this in a kind and understanding way to the extent that it's possible. Hopefully that does again set some examples.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, we live in certainly I don't want to say dangerous times, but very uncertain times, more so than ever. And I think that we actually haven't seen a lot of it unfold quite yet. So as time goes on, we're going to be dealing with people, like you mentioned, Adam, who are going to be faced with those challenges of how to deal with a staff that you may need to let go.
I literally have a friend who's like, his entire lab is going to have to go within the next year unless something changes. Like he's just like, there's no money. Like it's like these grants don't come through. They're NIH grants. This is how you cure cancer. Not anymore. And so, that's the kind of thing that is going to happen. And as tech consultants and helpers, that's going to impact a whole lot of people. How do you remove these people's access in an appropriate way? And, we all know offboarding is a real issue. You have to do offboarding well because multiple people are impacted in different ways by it. I think we did a TCN article about offboarding a while back.
I was going to say, you have a great article about offboarding specifically and kind of how to handle that. And it's always a question of timing sometimes. Like you want to be ready to revoke access, but not maybe too soon, unlike, how the way some of these federal agencies were kind of gutted. People found out that they were fired by swiping the badge. And if you got the green light, you were in, your lucky day. You still have a job. If you got the red light, sorry, you've been fired and we didn't think to tell you ahead of time. So it's not the best way to handle that. And so these are people, they're humans. There's humanity behind each of these roles. And so in our little worlds, we can try to, have a heart-to-heart conversation with someone and let them know, personally before the rest of the team finds out secretly behind their back. And maybe, before they just find out that their access has been revoked suddenly, so it's important to be sensitive about that stuff for sure.
Yeah. And, and the other side of it, I totally get, you also want to cut it fairly quickly. So there isn't security lapses. Like this person is now disgruntled. They've lost their job, and, if they, are wishing to take retribution in some way, you don't want to be in a situation where they can have the access to do that, so it's a fine line. And that's, again, the role that I think, a trusted technical advisor needs to play in that, okay, here's how we're going to do it from the technical standpoint. And here's what you need to do such that no one is shocked when suddenly their access is pulled.
Right.
that they know that they expected this to happen, but it's, and it's done quickly, but understandingly.
Yeah, in the proper order and timing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it comes up a lot more often when firing clients, and I never really, I think that term gets thrown around a lot. Like, we like to posture about how we fired a client and, and sometimes it's deserved, right? But there's other times where it's just not working out, and I try to like see that in advance, of something really blowing up, like whether there's some big dispute between, us and the client, or, we're just doing what you said and I'm sorry, it blew up in your face, but like you told us to do that, like it's your fault, like letting something play out in a negative way, instead kind of just getting ahead of it and trying to just let them know, hey, look, the way that we work is really not compatible with the way that, that your company operates. And so, we wish you the best, but we're going to part ways here. Like, you do it in a way where you can kind of like, hold your head up high and not go down in a blaze of glory, and have a good quitting story kind of thing to come out of it. Instead, just wrap it up cleanly, right?
I do feel like, I wonder if like we're so used to all the drama in our media, like, to an extent, both in real stuff that's going on in the world, because, if it bleeds, it leads,
Right.
Newspapers want drama because it makes for readers, but also certainly, our fiction, our the TV and the movies and whatnot, particularly the TV, frankly, these days has gotten so good and in many ways so realistic. It's hard to remember that it needs to be fictionalized. It needs to be ginned up so that it's fun to watch. And it's not a model for necessarily how you want to live your life, or conduct your business. And so, obviously, there's a wide range of that on TV and whatnot, but I do feel as though sometimes people get into that, like, well, the way to do this is like such and such character. No, probably not.
Probably not. Exactly.
Right. We're not
That'd
Succession
be more the exception.
here.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Certainly reminds me of someone who built their career on the catchphrase, "You're fired." Does that come to mind at all?
A little bit.
I'm not sure. That might have been before my time. Maybe I wasn't watching a lot of TV.
Oh man, yeah. Andy Espo in the chat says, "Keep everyone gruntled." That's probably a good sort of, a good way to be.
It's a George Carlin callback, I believe, right there.
Is it? Oh, nice. I love Carlin.
It could be if it wasn't. Yeah.
Right. It could be, exactly, for sure. Yeah. Well, it's true. We do have a lot of these little opportunities to try to just, move things in the right direction, not get swept up in the, if it bleeds, it leads, and in the drama of sort of like the broader, world.
Well, and actually, I'll give another example, because I actually think this is completely unrelated to anything we've talked about so far, but I thought it was an interesting scenario. I direct a large road race in Ithaca. Mm-hmm. And one of the issues with road races is you need traffic control. Mm-hmm. And so I had a local volunteer fire department helping with two intersections. And what they were basically supposed to do was park their trucks on either side of these intersections, not very far apart, so that traffic would see the lights and would slow down. But we had course marshals who were supposed to be directing traffic. As far as I know, I'm not there. But as far as I know, everything's gone relatively well. No one's told me there were big problems or anything like that. The next day, someone sends me a screenshot from a Facebook group where apparently someone is monitoring the police scanner and live streaming it to Facebook at all times. This is crazy. My mind is blown that this happens to an extent. Right. But it turns out the volunteer fire department people were kind of talking smack about us. These guys don't know what they're doing. Blah, blah, blah. On the scanner, they had no idea that it was in essence public.
Yeah.
And I share this because I think we all have little forums in which we think we're talking privately. And it can be a little bit interesting. So I get this. I actually don't even know the context, and I sort of get that they're talking smack about us. But so I forwarded off to the various contacts I have there, and including the Cornell police and the ambulance service that was helping us too. Because I don't. They're all sort of mentioned slightly, but only the fire department, got into trouble. And I get about an hour later, I get this very embarrassed message back because the guy had no idea that this was, going to be heard. And I actually wasn't offended. Wow. Like, experts, like we all do it with our users, right? Oh, man, can you believe they did that? That is so dumb, or, from a race timer perspective, how could they not put their bibs on the front? Like, come on, how will they put it on their back? Like, it's hard to do. Why do they do that? So, it's like, I wasn't offended that they were talking that way. And basically, the guy's like, look, if you still want to work with us, I totally understand. I'm like, no, you don't understand. I really do want to work with you. And so, and he's like, I have notes if you want. And so he gets back to me. He says, well, so next year we could do some informal training for you, or we could manage those intersections entirely, or some combination of both. And I'm going like, ding, 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 ding. That is the right answer. So we've just turned this kind of horrible, embarrassing situation, which I did not, blow up about, and it's like, and all that, into a tremendous advantage of suddenly I've got way better course management on these intersections, from people who know what they're doing and like have the radios and the traffic experience and all that. So like, again, not turning it into a drama. Pay attention to what you say privately, because sometimes it can get out. Yeah. But if it does, if bad things do happen, you can work this, by de-escalating, you can often get to a position which is actually better than where you started.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, they're basically incentivized to try to help you out, to try to like make up for the fact that they're embarrassed that, that they were speaking this way. And also like, happy that you didn't blow it up. And so they're probably like really appreciative. Now they're even more, enrolled in trying to helping you out. And so rather than exploiting this situation, like one option you would have had if you had modeled yourself on, society right now is you could have tried to go viral. I mean, you could take some selective editing clips and like make a YouTube video and like blow it up and then, and then exploit that, to try to make it a bigger problem or whatever. Instead, you did the like non-dramatic, like very mundane approach of just like normal human relations and communication, and like it worked in your favor. So great example.
Yeah. So I mean, just little things like that. And talking to the Cornell police guy later, I learned that they know about this, and they actually never say anything on the scanner other than where they're going, which they kind of have to.
Sure.
And he said that even with that, they have people who follow this stuff and will freaking show up at the scene of problems.
Right.
And so he said, because of this, the county is actually considering an encrypted communication system, because there's a different, I mean, I'm all in favor of transparency on our public safety things and all, but there's a time when people just need to be able to talk privately, because you do not want people showing up at the scene of a crime to see what's going on.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
or having people audit, what they're saying, and then other people don't really understand what point they're trying to make, and they're thinking about the fact that the public is listening, so we have to be a little obscure in how we're saying this stuff. And let's give them their own private channel. I think they probably deserve it, as long as maybe there's some oversight in general.
Right.
There's checks and balances there too. There's a million examples you can come up with in just day-to-day life where a situation presents itself, and there's sort of two ways you can go about handling it. And it's a great example just to try to de-escalate and not create more drama. The world doesn't need more of that. So at the same time, we have to give these big companies, these big tech companies, the kind of negative press that they deserve sometimes. And so, I'm sure for everyone, probably Backblaze is coming to mind once again, because we've just had another round of complaining about them. Yeah. But more to the point, I wanted to talk about your other recent article about AI answer engines. And I'll quote a couple things again. So just the one thing to get us started, very short line is, I thought this was great. While the likes of ChatGPT and Claude dramatically expand individuals' capabilities in writing, art, analysis, and even coding, Apple Intelligence feels more like Fisher Price's My First AI.
Okay, sorry.
That is a great quote. Yeah. So can you expound on that a little bit, Adam? And how do you really feel about Apple's AI?
I went to Ithaca College's Ed Tech Day, Educational Technology Day, and Apple had a booth there, and I sort of went over to see what they were doing and everything. And this one wanted to tell me about Apple Intelligence. I'm like, I'm sorry, but it's just not very good.
Right. What can you say?
I know how it works. It's not very good. People do not realize how fast the AI space is moving.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, ChatGPT went public in what, October 2023?
I think so. Yeah.
I mean, it's not very long.
Right.
And so a lot of the opinions that people formed, oh, it's just glorified autocomplete, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
No. Right. This is a sea change. This is the level of the internet, the web. It is that level. And it is changing so freaking quickly and so this is something we have to be aware of. I finally broke down and started subscribing to ChatGPT. And actually, for this article, I started subscribing to Claude, although Brett dropped that one because searching isn't nearly as good. When you get into the mindset of being able to kind of have this entity that you can query and have that all backed by the collection of human knowledge that is the World Wide Web. Not the training model. Don't trust the freaking training model. The training models are useful, but they're not the same thing as the actual pages that are out on the web. They seem like they're the same, but they're not quite. And once you can do that, really the world does change. And I mean, and when I like I said, coding, I'm actually in the middle of writing a native iOS app with ChatGPT. Actually, technically, I'm using something called Beyond Better, which is it's an app that sits on your Mac between the chatbot and you. And so it can work with stuff on your Mac and sort of provide tool access as well. And it prefers Claude, so I'm going with Claude on the actual coding side. But because of this, because it can it can actually write the files underneath Xcode.
Right.
And so, like, I tell it to do something, it works and works and works and works. I go over to Xcode and hit Command R, and a new version of my app appears on my phone.
That's amazing.
Wow. And keep in mind, I am not a programmer. I do not know what it is doing.
Yeah.
I don't even write Apple script. I mean, like the last time I did any kind of serious programming was really HyperCard days.
Nice.
And this gives me the feel of HyperCard because what I'm writing, it's a funny little app. I do race timing. And so I want a camera stopwatch app that works in very specific ways because I know exactly what I want. But like stopwatch apps, they have these tiny little buttons. And like when you're moving quickly and you're trying to watch someone cross the finish line, you cannot be tapping a little button.
Right.
What I'm actually replacing are these 1970s Seiko printing stopwatches, which have a big red button that, it's a physical button. You can feel it. So you don't have to look at it at all. You just, you can be watching the finish line and going tick, click, 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 click. And it's actually a good experience. The problem is these 1970s stopwatches, they still make them. They cost $500 for a glorified clock, right? And even getting our old ones repaired costs a couple $100.
Wow.
And so we only use them for backup timing. So it's just like, I just can't justify this kind of expense for something we're just getting a backup from, like hey, I missed that one. What's you got time to get for, place 86? Oh, I was off by 2 seconds. Okay, fix that. Not worth hundreds of dollars. So I started doing this. I had this idea for this app, and I'm like, maybe ChatGPT will help me make this.
Wow.
And it did. And then I got involved with this Beyond Better guy. He's Australian. The system's kind of neat.
Wow.
And so like now my problem is, I have to write tidbits in TCN. I don't get enough time to do the programming. Like I really want to work on my apps, but I don't have time.
Man, that takes me back to high school, like HyperCard days of just like, I want to just work on this thing. I don't want to do homework,
I'm busy.
Exactly.
And so, it's like, it is that much fun to be able to see this. And it has to be a native app because I have to have access to full access to the camera.
Right.
and I want it to look like a native app and be fast and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not writing it in some little funky system or whatnot like that might be easier. I want full on Xcode and Swift UI and things like that, and it is doing it. So that's I'm seeing that, and then I'm seeing image playground. Or ChatGPT's new image generation, where you can actually talk to it about the stuff in the image and it leaves the rest of stuff alone. And image playground turns out such tiddly little images. I mean, come on.
And you need like the latest iPhone hardware to even do it. It's just sad from Apple. It took forever, and they finally released it, and like to great fanfare. Like, we have Apple AI. Well, image playground, it's like, that's not the feature we were all waiting for.
The tech stuff, the writing tools are better. But the writing tools, well, first of all, they're only better in the when they've got their native interface in the apps. When you're in an app that doesn't natively support them, it's the interface. The experience is horrible. When you're in Mail and Notes, it's pretty good, and they're doing an acceptable job there. But I'm putting that up against Grammarly, which is top notch. The level to which it autocomplete fixes actual mistakes. It makes it possible for me to fix them in 17 different other ways. I can select a paragraph and see not an alternative version of the paragraph, but like a version of the paragraph with specific words, like what it would recommend. And so, it's very useful sometimes when you do a lot of writing, you get into the same phrasings all the time. You're like, you can do this, you can do that. Okay, I just need to vary the sentence structure. Things like that can be very helpful. But Grammarly is absolutely brilliant. It's leagues ahead of writing tools. And writing tools is the best thing that Apple is doing. Siri?
What is there to say anymore about Siri? It's just embarrassing. It's just sad.
I asked Siri the other day. I'm doing this thing for the running club that goes from April to September, and I said I wanted to know how many weeks there were between April 25th and which was the day I was doing it, and September 1st. So I said, Siri, how many weeks are there? And Siri said between April 25th and September 1st, there are 4 weeks and 3 days or something like that. I'm like, no, there aren't. That's completely wrong. Yeah. And so then I said, ask ChatGPT about it. And ChatGPT basically got it right. I mean, there you get into some funky stuff in terms of like, well, where in the day are you? And how many do you want to, are you actually reporting days and all that? But basically, the answer was 18, and and it got it right. And I was like, this is the example of we're not even at the enhanced Siri yet, and you're doing stuff completely wrong. And I think it used to get that sort of stuff right. Someone was telling me they thought it used to rely on Wolfram Alpha for that kind of stuff.
Right, like years ago it did. And I thought
the old Siri before even the kind of the intermediate Siri that we have now.
Right. It's just, I mean, literally. Objectively, Siri has gotten worse. I mean, every single year, and it's hard to really even believe it because of examples like this. Like how I would have thought that it could have gotten that answer right. And it's like we're all learning to trust it less and less. So it's just it's the biggest debacle Apple's had legitimately in quite a while.
A quick comparison to Adam's story. I went to tell Siri to call my daughter, and she goes, "Which one? You have 19." I'm like, what?
That's right.
Okay. I mean, I know you travel a lot, Sam. But,
Were you like a sperm donor like years ago, Sam? Like you got a bunch of kids you don't know?
Database, and I have kids I don't know about.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Some people have a woman in every port. Sam's got a daughter in every port.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, I had one. I was driving back from like a little weekend trip, and I think I asked for like, hey, get directions to Whole Foods, let's say, and she came back and said, which one? There's one on 1092 Any Street. She said, is that the one? I said, yes. She goes, great. I can get you directions. I can do this. I'm like, I already asked you for directions, and you offered to me. You suggested this one, and now you're like confused again. Like it's just every day there's an example like that. It's just sad,
Yeah. No, it's really true. In comparison, the chatbots just work.
Yeah.
I mean, I won't say they're perfect, not in any way, but the fact is they will not make those level of mistakes.
Right.
And we made much mockery was made of the hallucinations, right?
Yeah.
Early on, but particularly when you get into what I was writing about with treating them as answer engines, where they're doing a search for you.
Mm-hmm.
The level of mistake is much lower. I mean, there's no hallucination-y stuff going on at all in anything I've seen. Where you get the mistakes, if there are any, is one, sometimes they're in the original sources.
Yeah.
Right. So I was doing something where I needed to. It actually was a TCN article. I was needed to confirm some information that came from a PDF, and so there was an article written about the PDF, and so that's what the engine was basing its stuff on. And like one does as a journalist, I went and checked the original source.
Yeah.
No mention of the statistic. So I don't know where the article came up with this. Maybe that was written by a chatbot and invented it. I don't know.
Sure.
But the fact of the matter was that the answer engine was relying on other sources, and those were wrong. So it's not like you can't trust everything they say by any stretch, any more than you can trust anything you see on the internet. But realistically, when I started using them in favor of, for me, it was Google to basically to Brave Search. I really quite like Brave Search as a standalone search engine. I'm getting what I want now. Like, I'm not being told to go do homework.
Yeah. Interesting.
I'm answering. I have a question. I want the answer to my question, or I want to learn more about this area, and I don't want to be told to go do some reading, which might or might not actually even be what I want. Go read this and see if it's what you want.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't. Maybe I won't. Maybe you should just tell me what my answer is.
Right. Well, and also show me the sources. So if you're telling me that the answer is XYZ, how do you know that? Well, you've got your little citations there, and you can see that one of them is the New York Times, and it's probably reliable, maybe slightly biased, or and you can kind of make these evaluations. And so now I feel like we're in a sweet spot, because we were like, the pre-answer engine time was like, you're describing, you kind of have a conversation with the chatbot, and for all it's hallucinating and telling you stuff that's not true, and it's totally confident in that, just like it's confident in everything else. And you have to kind of like double check it and then tell it that it's wrong, and then then it tells you the right answer. And it's just like this whole
which it
weird
agrees.
process.
So like, oh, I'm so sorry.
It's like, right, oh, I'm such an idiot, I always get this one wrong. And so then, but like, so then, now we have answer engines, and the answer engines, will have a natural language conversation with you. It'll tell you the answer, so it helps you cut to the chase, and cites its original sources. But those original sources are still being done by actual journalists, actual humans in the real world, and handwritten and handcrafted, word by word. Imagine that, in this artisanal kind of like, old school way of writing. And so, like, what happens, and you brought this up a little bit in your article as well, when, there's a few things that are going on. So number one, you get the answer from the answer engine, and you don't have to go back to that original source, other than to maybe quickly click to see, do they really say that? Or maybe we're getting lazy and we just say, well, it's citing this article, this, publisher that I trust, and that's good enough for me.
Much of the time you don't care.
Yeah.
I mean, a vast amount of time, you just don't care. Like, it's not important that it be 100% accurate. You're asking a question which is like, came up in dinner table conversation. It's not, it's not meant to be for publication, or, you're not stating your reputation on it or something like that. You just want to know, like, oh, when did women's basketball become a thing? Happy to hear a little bit of information about that. Or
if it cites 3 sources, you're okay, I trust it. That's good enough for me. I don't need to go check the sources and evaluate each one. Right. Yeah.
And so that's thing one. Thing two is that we get very caught up in commercial content that is designed to, in some way, earn money, and people are paid to make it. They're expecting to earn, they're expecting there to be some kind of a business model associated with it. And that's totally legitimate. I mean, that's a real thing. Been there, done that, 35 years, But simultaneously, there's a vast amount of content out there merely is created because someone wants to create it, or because a nonprofit does, or a government, or things like that. That like vast amounts of, I mean, I have no way of even estimating what the percentages are, but vast amounts of information is not commercial. So like the government isn't going to stop producing the reports that are required by legislation. Well, maybe never mind. That's a bad example. Sorry. Many government reports will still be keep being produced regardless of anything else, just because that's what the systems do. The FBI has this Internet Crime Complaint IC3, something like that, bureau, and they do stats on internet crime. They're probably going to keep doing that, and those are public domain. I mean, they're from the government, kind of by definition, and high quality research that's just appearing. So we always want keeping in mind those two. Whenever we start getting too close into the like, well, and how is this going to become a business model? There's always that worth keeping in mind.
It's an interesting point. I mean, sure, there's a huge amount of original content that was produced and published way back in the day that's unchanging, like books and things, for reference. There's new studies like you're describing and the published results of those. That's all, maybe just going to continue in its same form. There's also the content, like you said, that's being created commercially. So the two business models there are advertising or a paywall. Either of those models seem to be really dramatically affected by this new way of going about things, where if you don't get the click on the website, you're not going to get the advertising revenue. So what's the incentive for that content to be produced if most of it is consumed by chatbot or answer bots that can then regurgitate it without directing people to the original source? Or paywalls are even worse, because if you paywall the content, then the answer bot can't index it either. Or maybe there's a way to make exceptions for it, like a new version of robots.txt or whatever.
Certainly, I mean, publishers and Google sort of are complicit in this regard, right? Google can get through the paywalls and index the stuff. So you find it in a Google search, and then you can't get to it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, how annoying is that? Because you're not going to subscribe to this publication just to read one freaking article.
Right. Well, you brought this up about micropayments, right? Essentially, like there really needs to be a way to, like, if I want to give this advertiser 10 cents just so I can like verify the source, and I'm probably not going to visit them again, there needs to be an easy way for me to do that. Like, I would do that all day long if to support the people creating content,
the publishers. No question.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it really does change. Because I actually, I've started subscribing to 404 Media. They're just doing amazing investigative journalism. The Verge. They're just doing a great job. I'm impressed with the work they're doing. But simultaneously, like if I get sent over to a Washington Post article that's behind a paywall, not going to do it. Just not. I'm uninterested. I literally don't want to read the Washington Post for the most part. This one article popped up that I want to look at. That does not mean that I'm going to subscribe. It just isn't. And so the kind of the point I was getting at is that we shouldn't assume that business models are sacrosanct. They've come, they've gone. Classified ads used to be how newspapers made all their money. Right? Classified ads were a huge profit center. Craigslist destroyed that instantly. And I can't say that that's good thing, bad thing. It just is. It is the way technology works. It comes in, it finds a place where, frankly, probably the economics are inefficient. Like, there's no reason why it should have cost that much to place a classified ad. And Craigslist changes the equation, disrupts the business model, and suddenly, stuff happens, and not good stuff in a lot of cases. And a lot of small newspapers went under because of that kind of thing. That's a shame. But again, you can't prevent it. Technology doesn't work that way. You don't get to say, well, we think this might have some negative business effects on these particular industries. Right. What we can do, hopefully, is propose alternatives, such as
I'll propose,
build a freaking micropayment system.
Right. So Apple's actually in a great position here, I think. Like they have Apple News. They have sign in with Apple. I feel like you just kind of like very easily combine those two features. Yeah. And like, so you make it like, with your Apple News subscription, you get unlimited access to any of these publishers that opt into this system. And then Apple and the publisher both see, they can track the metrics of how many people are coming from Apple News. It could just be included with iCloud Plus. Maybe there's a budget, maybe if you, I think en masse it would work out where like the number of people that are, consuming like many articles essentially for free with their iCloud Plus subscription, on any number of different news sites on the web would offset the people that are just like consuming one or two. And so it wouldn't actually cost me any additional money other than just being an iCloud Plus subscriber.
Yeah, it's how you slice and dice it. There's a guy, he's Turkish, I can blank on his name slightly, but the product is called Listen Later. And it's a service where you send it a URL to text and it converts it to a podcast. And they're a Tidbits sponsor right now, so take that with a grain of salt. Any event, the reason why I'm mentioning them is not because of the service. What I like about it is that it's pay as you go. So it's not a subscription. It's not like $15 a month or something like that. Every time he's got costs because he's got to send it, he's got to run this through the Chat GPT API, OpenAI's API or whatever it is he's using in the back end, costs him a certain amount. And he's basically, passing that cost along with some level of markup to count for all of the other business aspect he has to deal with. And that seems to me to be a really fair way to do stuff. If you don't use it much, you don't pay very much. If you use it a lot, you pay more.
That doesn't work in the modern world of like, venture capital because, you need to show like massive user growth. And that's the exit that everybody wants is like, well, I'm going to, raise a bunch of money and sell my company and have a massive exit. Having a little boutique business on the side that generates, a few thousand a month or something is like frowned upon, but you're right. It's a much more fair business model. Like that's the way things used to be done,
Right. Right. Yeah. And so I think, that I think is a lot of it. But anyway, we should get back. It is interesting. With the AI answer engines, part of the reason why I wrote this article was I think it is qualitatively different and better than dealing with the standard search engines. Yeah. Because there really is, with the search engines, it's like this guessing game, right? You're trying to come up with the keywords that are going to hit.
It's an incantation. It's like a spell you're casting, and you're trying to get the right like order of terms and like which term and
And if you get it wrong, you start over.
Yeah.
Right. And then there's this skill that you develop just by once you've got your results, parsing through those results. How many times have we sat with a client and we're like, we've done a Google search, if you do Google with a client, and then you're scrolling really quickly because some of the results, your eyes are already trained.
Not them.
These are ads.
Exactly. Yeah. And your client's like, what do you like? What about that? And I'm like, no. That's here we go.
I love that when they say, "How about? Oh, this looks good." I'm like,
what about?
I can already tell that's
like
backkeeper. Right. Exactly. Yeah. Oh man, it's so true. Yeah. But this is a new skill. You're right. It's a whole new way of like interacting. Yeah.
So it's a new skill, but simultaneously, it's much the way you would interact with a person. So you ask your question. You do not want to just type a few keywords. Yeah. You want to ask the actual question that you have. And because that will feed into the context that it extracts from those, the search that it does, first of all, and the context that it extracts from the results. And then if you didn't get it perfectly right, maybe you didn't phrase your question correctly, maybe you don't even quite know what your question is. Right. A fair number of my searches are "tell me about," and once I've gotten what I really want to know is, and you can just continue the conversation, and the context sticks around there, and you keep potentially adding more search results to that context window that it's using to answer your question because you varied the question now. Perplexity, which is one of the best of these things, it even like gives you kind of canned questions to continue to learn more, which on the one hand, if it's a search I really initiated and I care about, whatever. No, I don't care. But if it's so when did Harvard start admitting women? Cornell started admitting women in the 1870s. Harvard, well, a little bit later. And so you can that's more of a conversation. And so like Perplexity's little suggestions, some of those are interesting. What is, which other schools in the Ivy League started admitting women, in the 1960s, Yale. I'm sorry. There's things like that where, it just like, it's a little open-ended. I am just curious. And so these suggestions are not a terrible thing to trigger a little more curiosity and learn more about a topic. Other times, I know what I want and I'll direct the conversation myself.
This is kind of like when calculators got really like cheap and, we could just do math, easily. Yeah. It's like,
I remember
it's a new tool.
We couldn't use, when I was in school, you could not use calculators on tests.
Right.
Now my son could use graphing calculators on tests.
Totally. Yeah.
And so like the whole testing is a whole nother story. Like what you test has to change. Like memorization is just irrelevant now. But simultaneously, part of the reason why I think this is interesting is you can do things like say, tell me how to accomplish this task, which I kind of know, but it's, I haven't done it in a year and it's changed in the last version of Mac OS and all of that sort of stuff, and, it might not be perfect. But it'll get you in the right direction.
Yeah.
Like, I said, you can't necessarily assume that it's perfectly up to date even because like, obviously, something's changed. It's changed 3 times over the last, 5 years in Mac OS. It might not get the latest version or know what version you're even using, but simultaneously, it will tell you, and you can just sort of say, oh no, I'm in Sequoia, and it will revise. And, I found it very helpful for like helping someone with an app that I don't know very well. Like I'm not an Apple Mail user, never have been. And so, I can get around in the app. I know how mail works.
Never.
Whoa.
Never.
Adam is still using Eudora.
Yeah. Used Eudora for a long, long time. I went from Eudora to Gmail on the web.
Wow.
And now I use MimeStream, which is Gmail on the Mac, and basically native Gmail. But I've never liked Apple Mail. And so, but occasionally I have to help someone with it. And so, I'm an expert in mail clients, but that doesn't mean I can find anything in Apple Mail quickly, because I just don't use it. And so I found like helping me navigate quickly as I'm helping someone who really knows very, very little, that's been very effective. Oh yeah, it's in the message menu. And just reminding me and helping me kind of navigate quickly, or even sometimes finding things in settings because there's a lot of stuff in there and Apple's search is lousy.
Yeah, we talked about this on the show. We're going into Microsoft as an admin and trying to find some very deep nested settings, which change all the time. If it's Microsoft or Google, it's ridiculous.
And we're the experts.
Right.
I'm still thrown by him not being an Apple Mail user. I'm just still taken back by this.
Yeah. It's possible you too could step back from Apple Mail.
Of course, one of my excuses for a lot of things is that I want to use what most of my clients will use, and so I can be, have more of an expertise in it. But it's mostly fine. But anyway, moving on from the Apple bashing.
That is a resounding endorsement.
Totally. It's the most praise Apple Mail's gotten in quite a while.
Can we use your quote on our website?
Mostly fine.
Mostly fine.
Joe Seppineri of Cymax says mostly fine.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, so maybe I'm overblowing this, Adam, but it seems to me that there's a few factors that are coming together. One is, again, the business models underlying a lot of the current content creation on the web, besides people that just like to produce stuff and share it with the general public, which will continue, and the research organizations, governments, NGOs, et cetera, that will continue to produce content. A lot of the stuff that gets produced is produced for advertising revenue or through behind a paywall. So one factor is the clicks reduce, the business model will have to change. So there's going to be kind of like maybe a little bit of a dip there, and we'll see how that plays out. The other one is that you also have really cheap content creation through generative AI. So there's a lot more people that can just, enter a prompt and have a whole article written and just, posted immediately, or maybe without human intervention at some point very, very soon.
It's already possible.
Right.
There are auto blogging services.
Generate, 50 prompts for me that will result in 50 great articles. Cool. Now post all those to my WordPress site. You don't even have to write that. I'm sure it's just like you press a button and that happens. And so this AI slop is being created simultaneously. That's now also kind of, supplanting or displacing some of the human generated content that maybe actually goes through a human cognition process of like, well, this article has to be a certain standard, or it has to be factual in some way or whatever, versus like just created by AI without any kind of, auditing process. So as that AI slop gets created more and more, now the answer bots are just pointing to those articles like, well, my friend, this other bot wrote this totally batshit crazy article that I'm going to just point you to, and it's going to be
and it's like, bots all the way down.
Yeah, exactly. So what happens?
So a couple thoughts. So first of all, in fact, the AI slop only happens because of Google. Right?
Sure.
If you can't, if you're not going to get the hits on it, there's no reason to waste your cycles creating it. So I think again, that's I won't say that it's going to stop, because obviously there's no, if it's more or less free to create, people will still create it for a wide variety of reasons, including pranks, basically. But the fact is that Google is is sending ad traffic, to them is the reason why they're doing it. And it's also, someone did I posted in the comment thread. A lot of good information comes from comment thread. Tidbits Talk actually gets the same number of hits, roughly speaking, as Tidbits now, because Google has decided that user generated content is better.
Interesting.
And so again, they get to decide, and we have to live with it. Right. They control the algorithm. So whereas the answer engines, like if you're prompting, that changes, you become the person in charge of the algorithm in essence. But that said, Google is something like 27 times the traffic of Bing, which is number 2. And search engines in general are 34 times the traffic of the chatbots. So at the moment, 34 times, 34x. At the moment, the chatbots are rising, but Google still controls everything.
That sounded ominous.
It does, because in fact, one of the answer engines that I tested is Google's AI mode, which is a Google Search Labs experiment, and it's actually not one of the better ones. It's at the bottom, towards the back of the pack, behind ChatGPT and Perplexity in particular. But it's like chatbots are not they're replicable. Like Google has them. Google has Gemini. So, even if answer engines are where we're going, Google's going to go there. And so, I think everyone, like ChatGPT is sort of a new thing. Like Bing tried to come in and compete with Google, and it's got 27 times less traffic. Wow. Despite being the default engine for all Edge users and whatnot, right?
That's interesting. Yeah, I was going to say one major factor that could flip that whole thing is Apple just changes the default for Safari to Perplexity or one of these other ones.
So you want to talk about how Apple could turn their stuff around, and I don't know if this is possible at this point, but they buy Perplexity and build that in, right. And suddenly. They still would need to figure out a way that they're monetizing. The problem is Apple's getting that $20 billion from
$20
Google.
billion a year says a lot. Yeah.
Hard to pass up. Yeah. And so, but nonetheless, if there is a situation where they are not allowed to do that because of consent decrees, whatever, who knows? But it seems hard to envision that happening, because can the government really tell Apple who they choose? They might make it so that Google can't negotiate certain kinds of terms, but they can't really tell Apple what they can do at this point, because Apple is not in any kind of consent decree scenario. So I don't quite get it, but it does feel to me like if Apple wanted to change the equation, that's the solution to is to basically come up with their own search engine, which normally we would say Apple doesn't have to monetize because Apple makes their money on hardware. But obviously, so much money is coming from services that, unless they could somehow feel that it was replacing that $20 billion a year. I mean, $20 billion is enough to even make Apple notice. I mean, $570 million to the EU, whatever, that's pocket change,
Right.
When we lost that on the couch yesterday. At
the time of this recording, though, there's a news report today, and we've heard these before, but there might be some traction here where Apple's going to have a deal with Gemini before the end of the year.
Wow,
which is Google, but
a deal with Gemini, but is that just for AI allowing external chatbot access to Siri?
Yep.
So, I mean, and you've tried this with ChatGPT and Siri, right? It's lame. Like you don't have.
It's worse than just using ChatGPT. Yeah,
right. It's much worse than using ChatGPT by itself.
Sure. Right.
Yeah. And so, I mean, like one of the things I found very useful with ChatGPT, for instance, is like I'm trying to fix some device. I take a picture of it, the inside of it, and I upload it to ChatGPT, and I was like, how do I get this thing out? Mm-hmm. And I don't even know what the search term is. It turns out it was a spade connector. Like I was having trouble removing a spade connector. It was really stiff. And like I wanted to know if there was a trick to it, or if I needed to be careful not to horse on it too much, whatever. Mm-hmm. Got a very good response from ChatGPT, analyzing the photo, telling me what it was, explaining how to get it off. I'm like, thank you. That is what I needed to know.
So I'm like you, Adam. I'm a subscriber to ChatGPT for $20 a month, and I keep telling these guys about it, and they just keep referring to ChatGPT as my girlfriend. So Sam asked me as early as today, do I have a name for my girlfriend yet? And I told Sam, yes, my name for her is Sam, which is short for Samantha, but for all intended purposes, I call her Sam. Yeah.
Now, Jerry, if you're paying her $20 a month, I think there's a different word than girlfriend for
I don't know. It's not usually done on a subscription basis, though, Joe.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah. I mean, not that I know, but yeah, I've heard. But yeah, that's
10 points for Gryffindor on that one.
Well, Adam, we could go on about dissing Siri and praising a lot of these alternatives.
So easy.
Yeah, exactly.
So easy.
But you've given me some things to think about here in terms of just how there's a lot of interconnected factors that like as the business models change, the incentive structure changes, maybe the AI slop problem gets less of an issue, and also if we're all turning to answer engines, which themselves can maybe evaluate the original sources because they have to,
and which are themselves moving in a subscription model.
Yeah.
I mean, like to ChatGPT, if you want to use it a certain amount, you have to pay the $20 a month. Perplexity is still pretty free, but they've got a pro tier too. We pay them $20 a month, and
this is the stuff that keeps Joe up at night. By the way, I want you to know that. Adam.
Worrying about AI slop,
sleepless, nights.
It's funny because I will say that the AI slop, so for this article, I built a Keyboard Maestro macro that opened the same search in 4 answer engines in 4 split panes in Arc. Nice. So I could actually compare them. And then I maintain a spreadsheet of how I rated them from 0 to 3 and how well they did. And that's how I say, when I say ChatGPT and Flexer are the best, it was with my real searches, which you can go in and look at, and it's a public thing. So, but what I found interesting about it is we talk about AI slop, but I actually didn't run into any. I mean, it's not inconceivable that I ran into an AI generated article, but if so, it was good enough that I didn't think, oh, that's an AI generated article.
That's interesting.
And so, so it feels to me like the AI slop thing, maybe a little bit more of like what you stumble on if you wander randomly, like on Instagram and Facebook, and just kind of browsing around and Reddit or whatever. I don't know, but the point being that when you're directing your actions, or at least for me in my particular worlds of searching for anything, I never felt like I was being exposed to this in any way. So
interesting.
Not saying it's not out there. I know it is. I know it's a problem. I am perturbed by it as well. But I will say that, from my little, blindered focus on the internet, it hasn't really affected me.
That's good to know.
just saying that, I think people, you have to see if it really hits you, and then how it hits you. Where do you actually see it?
Right.
Because if you're using social media, it's all slop. So AI and not.
Now, where can I find all this wonderful content that your analysis? Yeah.
So the Tidbits article is at tidbits.com. You can find it there, and along with some various other stuff that we've been talking about. And then actually, I'm just working on TCN content for Friday. And one of the articles I've got there actually is on the importance of generating an AI policy for businesses. Nice. Because it turns out that, like Jerry and me, like everyone's doing this. Well, not everybody. Only half of all employees are using AI tools at work, often without sanction or regulation. Right. And so a business needs to think about this. And there's productivity gains to be gotten. Like, you want to do this, you should take advantage of the benefits of these tools. This is not a philosophical thing of like, oh, everything has to be handcrafted. I mean, like, you're not whittling everything out of wood either. It's right. You don't build a house with your bare hands. We use tools. We are tool using monkeys. And this is a new tool, and it will make you more effective and more productive and more quickly. But there are also legal consequences of, you don't put patient records into one. You need to make sure you're not, violating anyone's privacy. You need to, make sure, again, like everything is, if you are actually selling something or, promoting something, you need to make sure it's right. Like you need a policy which says nothing goes out without human oversight if that's what your business kind of does. And
it's a really good starting point to have the policy written about that at the very least, before we even put technical controls in place and things like that.
Precisely. And you got to talk to everybody. Like, what does IT say in terms of about like, what are the rules about, whether or not our conversations are used for training? So like free chat GPT, you have to turn that off. And Gemini always turned on, so, but if you have a business plan, no, it's not going to train on your stuff. Like, they're pretty good about that. And so that's the kind of thing which, this isn't a topic I knew a lot about. So I've had to do a lot of research, but I think it is something, and and obviously, what this really does is an excuse to start the conversation. So anyway, that's the kind of stuff that I'm writing about for TCN subscribers for May, because I think it's really, really important.
I mentioned this, by the way.
Think about this.
Sorry to interrupt. I just mentioned this on a previous show. We don't have to have our users turn off Apple Intelligence because it doesn't do anything anyway. So they could just leave that on. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if you send it information, it's going to lose it anyway.
What models? Well, Adam, it's always great to talk to you. I would like to direct everyone to Tidbits Content Network. If you're not already a subscriber, that sounds like a perfect place to start for people to get your article about writing an AI policy. This is great content that we can share with our clients, and they get a lot of value out of it, and they look at us as providing that value, and it's actually Adam providing all that value through Tidbits Content Network. So definitely check that out at tcn.tidbits.com. And thanks again, Adam, for joining us on Command Control Power. It's always great to have you.
Anytime. It is such a hoot to be able to come in and chat.
Amazing. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.
Take care, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Jerry does his voices of customers of all kinds.
Am I on the cloud?
Joe spins his deeply detailed yarns all the time.
I have a whole story about this.
Sam is on the road again, phoning in from a hotel.
At least we know where I